All right, we're going to get started here. I'm James Chelman. I'm the marketing manager for the HCI group. Wanted to go ahead and thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you for signing up. Just a couple housekeeping items. We will have all of the lines muted throughout the entirety of the webinar, and we will be recording this webinar, and we will distribute the webinar to everybody at a later time. So again, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to introduce John McDaniel. He's the Executive Vice President of Innovation and Technology Solutions for the HCI Group.
Thanks, James, and welcome everyone. I appreciate you taking your time. I know you're all busy, and I think this is certainly a very relevant topic that a number of individuals I chat with on a daily basis express a lot of interest in, and that's one of the reasons we decided to broadcast a webinar with what I consider one of the leading experts in the industry as one of the keynote speakers. We really tried to look at it from the perspective of gauge what the real interest is, and we came up with 3 objectives for this entire session. And the first one, because there are so many different terms defining digital health technologies, we thought we'd kind of put some parameters around and say, you know, from a health standpoint, this is what we mean when we talk about digital health technologies. So that's the first objective. The second one was kind of the role in consumerism and why they are starting to drive individually healthcare organizations to adoption of digital health technologies in a couple of different perspectives. One, starting to take accountability for their healthcare and managing their entire healthcare process. More importantly, more and better dialogue with the care providers treating them when they need treatment. It's interesting, I did some research, and one of the findings I came upon just recently was, and I often like to ask the question, if I can answer this particular question, I'll give them a bottle of wine. Well, there's probably going to be too many participants to do that. However, just from a factual perspective, there are roughly 260,000 different mobile health applications available in the marketplace today that consumers can buy and use in capturing and or managing healthcare related information from their perspective, in some cases uploading it to respective EHR. So they are starting to play a major role in it, and I think we're going to spend some time talking about that. And lastly, and probably the most important, is what are some of the strategies for adoption of digital health technologies in the healthcare industry? There's a number of organizations that have started adopting early and have encountered some major problems. We think we understand why. So we'll talk a little bit about what we've seen from our clients that makes sense as a starting point to develop that strategy. As was stated earlier, just a reminder, I suspect we would like you, well, I don't suspect, we would like you to list any questions that you have. If you can write them out and send them in as a chat request. We will try to answer as many of those as we possibly can as we conclude with the session. However, I think there's a lot of content we may not get to that point, so we will make a point of capturing the question and responding in writing to everyone that is participating on this webinar. So with that, I would really like to introduce what I consider a good friend and colleague, David Chou. David is the Vice President, CIO, and Chief Data Officer for Children's Mercy Hospital. I followed David for quite some time now, and I've seen him speak actually around the world, and he's really renowned and recognized as a thought leader and someone that is really starting to drive and push, relative to his role, healthcare into future directions, utilizing new technologies as we start to transform the industry. So with that, I would like to welcome David to the podium.
Thanks, John, and thanks everyone for joining. So just to start it off, we hear the industry buzzword, digital disruption, digital transformation. Is probably one of the most overused industry buzzwords. So what does it actually mean? If I had to boil it down, it's really an organizational cultural transformation. That's what's driving this piece. This journey, and I want to call it digital transformation journey, it's exactly the same as a lean journey. So most of the organizations have gone through some lean Six Sigma process improvement journey. This digital transformation is the same thing because it really starts with the culture. you must think about reinventing your entire operational process in order to make this work. You can't buy a shiny tool. You can't buy technology and all of a sudden it says, well, we transform digitally. A lot of it has to do with transforming the organization's culture. So when we think about why do we need to transform, here's an interesting slide to think about. Let me advance this. Here you go. So interesting stats. Now this is a stat that I got from a friend of mine, Ray Wong, who's one of the industry renowned speakers on digital transformation. 52% of the Fortune 5 firms are gone since 2000. That's astounding. So think about what happened to these companies. What happened to them? Were they probably acquired, merged, bankruptcy, closure? Another interesting stat to think about is 55% of companies in the Fortune 500 have lost money in 2015. Wow, what a huge sort of stat right there to think about. Losing money on more than half of these companies. So how does that sound in terms of our industry in healthcare? Right, we are fighting for 2 to 3% profit margin on a regular basis. We're seeing a huge decline nationally in the number of hospital beds throughout the U.S. So in order for our organizations to stay relevant, things must change, and we must think differently in terms of this change in order to be around. I mean, you could pick up the newspaper or go online and read about at least a few different types of hospitals that are closing or getting acquired or merging. So that is the trend that we're facing, that we're facing this day, and we must think about how digital is going to help us gain that competitive advantage. So as with any major initiative, there's a lot of risk in whether you're pursuing or not pursuing an opportunity, right? This comes down to the organization having to make a decision as far as moving forward. So if an enterprise chooses early on to pursue any digital business or disruption, then there's a risk in the areas that I have highlighted. Specifically related to digital business are privacy and security risks. I'm sure that's on top of mind for all healthcare and all healthcare IT professionals is security. It's one of the things that probably doesn't allow CIOs to sleep well at nighttime, especially with all the various ransomware that you're seeing around the world that's shutting down countries. I mean, we're not talking about shutting down businesses now. We're talking about it shuts down countries where they can't operate. So as you put more and more digital assets online, there's a lot of risk there, obviously. And then let's think about even ethical and branding risks that may come into play. For example, when smart machine technology are employed as a frontline customer service agent, you're starting to replace people with robots or let alone more self-servicing functions for customers where you're allowing them to do a lot of heavy lifting. You need to prepare the consumers for that. That's a big change. So those are some of the areas where there's a lot of risk if you're moving towards a digital adoption or the digital transformation. So what about the other side? What happens if the enterprise chooses to wait too long in terms of doing anything? Well, there's a risk there. The obvious risk is that the enterprise will miss out on the opportunity. However, what's equally at risk is the fact that the consumers may move on. So they're going to leave utilizing your organization as the preferred healthcare provider of choice. So let's think about media companies that have been slow to go digital. I mean, you guys probably know what I'm talking about, right? Blockbuster has the ability to buy Netflix, but chose not to. And what happened now? They're not existing anymore. So the same thinking has to be sort of thought about in the healthcare market. And so first off, there may be new competitors that were not anticipated if you don't pursue the opportunity. Secondly, if an enterprise waits too long, then your competition may get moving first and gain some competitive advantage. So there's a lot of risk in terms of going towards this transformation and not going towards this digital movement. But it's something that you really have to think about as an organization and any leader in the healthcare vertical. These slides are, excuse me. having some trouble with this keyboard. Here we go. So where are we at currently? Let's look at the last 2 decades. The way enterprises have operated has really influenced. It's been influenced by technology phases. We're all aware that we're entering the new phase, the digital business phase. Remember in the initial days, the web was designed to provide people with information, right? There's hyperlinks, email, we're able to collaborate electronically. In the early 2000s, conducting business and transactions on the internet marked the e-business and e-commerce phase. By 2005, e-business was complemented with the introduction of smartphones and social networks, right? Businesses and public sector enterprises use these extensively to find new value. For me personally, I use social media or social tools as a platform for learning and engagement. Are you utilizing those tools with your patients or even internally with your employees? Think about it. That's something that's a tool that's out there that could be beneficial. So businesses and public sector enterprises are finding new value in these tools. Digital marketing became a major focus for consumer-facing industry, and with the ability to add physical things to the internet things that we call it, now things are sitting equally with people and business operation as active participants in the internet. So what does that mean when I say active participants? Everything's smarter these days. Your hospital beds, your smart pumps, your ventilators, they're all connected. They're all active participants listening on your infrastructure. And that's where the biggest difference is going to be between the digital world and the current autonomous business phase that we have seen. So here's an example of how your life would be impacted if everything was listening. And we are really moving towards this phase, right? Your car parking meter that's going to tell you, I need to park somewhere. Parking meters sending information to the car telling you where the closest parking spot is. Building to maintenance provider telling you that your furnace is about to fail. A bus's smartphone telling you the bus that you're waiting for is running a few minutes late. Smartphone to the bus telling the bus, I'm waiting for you to come. Street to nearby autos telling you there's a road closure. So these are all the active listening that we're going to be seeing in the world that can impact our lives. So now think about, in our world, in the healthcare world, what are we going to do to take advantage of these active listening? And that's where we need to get ahead and think, how do we change our business process to take advantage of these latest and greatest technology? Let me give you one more example. So I was recently at the airport in Minneapolis, and I went down to one of the restaurants, and what did I see? It was a restaurant that was all digital. They had one or two waiters serving the entire restaurant, and I ordered everything through their app on the table that looks just like this. So I was able to look at the menu. I was able to get content information about the nutrition, and then I was able to make my purchase, prepay for my purchase, and prepay for a gratuity, all right there on the spot. Waited a few minutes, the waiter came with my drink order, and then 5 minutes later came back with my food order. In addition, the other thing I noticed is I was also upsold by the restaurant. They were able to show me great pictures of an appetizer, and then following that, when they knew my meal was coming close to the conclusion, they gave me a really nice picture of dessert that I ordered. So think about this example where this restaurant who saw a 10 to 20% increase in sales with just digital menus. And think about the convenience factor from a consumer perspective. Now I could sit down, make an order. I don't have to wait for a waiter to come, especially in an airport. For a waiter to come, that's gonna take 5 minutes to get my order, and then come back with my drink, and then take another 10 minutes just to fulfill my food order. This really creates that convenience factor. And I like to think about convenience is the key to consumerism, because as consumers, that's the first thing we value is convenience. We live in a attention on-demand economy now, and healthcare is going to move towards that as we speak. If not, we're there already. Think about all the various telemedicine, virtual care platform that's out there. Even for me personally, when my kids are sick, I would use the virtual care platform. I use all of them. I would use Teladoc, MD Live, um, and some of the other ones, and see who's going to respond to take care of my kid the quickest, versus going to even my own facilities that may not be open 24 by 7 from an urgent care perspective. So convenience is going to be key, especially as we move towards, or we are in a attention on-demand economy. So this is where the consumer's expectations changing rapidly in healthcare. I mean, you can see the various types of always-on listening devices that is around surrounding us. So I'll give you a prime example. If I was a patient that is supposed to be on a low-sodium diet, restricted calories, and as a hospital provider, you should be able to monitor my behavior outside the hospital. So if I'm that patient that's supposed to be on a restricted diet, and all of a sudden I go to a Burger King on the drive-thru and I order a double Whopper of bacon loaded with Coke and fries and baked potatoes, what needs to happen at that point? Well, you think about all the various tools that we have that's actively listening, there should be some intervention at that point. As a hospital provider, we talk about population health, managing wellness. Well, right now, we're not doing anything about trying to prevent me from ordering that double Whopper. What really needs to happen is, with all these active listening, we need to be able to engage with the patient and say, hey, David, as soon as I pull up the Burger King, using my location setting on my cell phone, the hospital or my care provider should be able to automatically detect that and send me a note, say, hey, David, remember, you're on this low-calorie restricted diet. You should not be at Burger King. If you are there, we can't stop you, but why don't you order a salad instead? That may be a healthier option. That way you can still get your cravings settled. But that is not happening. So when you think about from a healthcare provider, we need to be able to take advantage of all these active listening tools, take advantage of social data. What if I posted the fact that, what if I checked in at Burger King on my social media feeds, right? Those are signs that a hospital should also pick up and trigger some sort of alert and say, David's at Burger King. Tell him not to eat a double Whopper. So with all these various factors that come in play, that's the future population health. It's about getting the data, it's about being able to intervene, and it's really about changing behaviors. And you won't be able to get that to that state unless you think about the digital world and transforming how we operate. So this graph just shows you how the patient will be in the future. It'll be the future of connected consumers. Everything's going to be connected as we speak. So I talked a lot about digital, sort of where we're moving towards some of the technology things that we should take advantage of. But how do you even get started? Is there a magical button easy button that you can just push to make this happen? Unfortunately not. I wish I had this one magical solution to provide. Otherwise, if I did, I'll probably destroy the Bains and McKinsey in the consulting world. But unfortunately, there isn't. It really comes down to understanding your organization. How does your organization respond to change, and what is your organizational DNA? This is a very important to think about. Do you classify your organization as a market leader? Who's a market leader, right? They're probably out there pushing the envelope. They're transforming the healthcare industry. They're the first to try anything that comes out. So the Apples, the Samsungs, those will be the market leaders that you think about in the technology world. So 5% of the companies in the world are market leaders. So very few of us work for market leaders, and we have to realize that. So secondly, is your organization a fast follower? 15% of the organizations in the world are fast followers, so that's okay. Prime example, Facebook's the market leader. So what about Snapchat, or vice versa? Facebook copied some of the features from Snapchat. Who's a fast follower? Who's a market leader? So fast follower, usually they'll watch what the competition does, and then they'll wait to see how adoption rates goes, and then right behind them, they're following up with the same sort of tools and techniques to drive that innovation. But most of us fall in the 50% mark. Most of the organizations that you work with are cautious adopters. So you're waiting to see what the trend is. You're waiting to see how the others are feeling or achieving their success. But you're not going to be the, at the forefront trying to lead this. So most of the organizations are in this cautious adopters, and the remaining 30% are in this danger zone that we call laggards. So they really don't want to disrupt their business. They care less about consumer engagement. They're waiting to do things because they have to, whether it's regulatory and so forth. So it's important to understand your organizational DNA, because if you don't have that nailed down, you can't change. You won't be able to transform digitally. So I want to share with you where I am at currently with my organization at Children's Mercy in Kansas City. So this is just some stats about us. You know, we're about 8,000 employees now. We provide a lot of uncompensated care. We get about 5.6 million visits on our website and so forth. So this is who we are. So I walked into an organization that did not have any strategy. Forget about digital strategy, just no strategy at all from a technology perspective, not aligned to the organization. And the first thing we have to do is really get the strategy roadmap in place. But when you think about who should be leading the digital transformation, this is something that needs leadership. It's not frankly, it has to start from someone from the top. And this is a survey done by Gartner where a lot of respondents feel that the CEO should be the primary business leader. But who's next in line? You know, the CIO should be there. Some say the CFO. But the gist of the slide is you need to have a leader. You need to have a leader that can influence decisions, and you need to have someone taking charge of this, because if you don't, if it's not in your cultural DNA to want to transform, then will never happen. Ultimately, we'll also start with you. You know, all of you guys listening on this webinar, it starts with you guys. You must disrupt yourself on a daily basis. It's a very hard thing to absorb and say, what do you mean disrupt myself? Every day you should wake up thinking about how can I disrupt myself and do something different. Because you're not, you're being status quo and you're just going along with how things have done, how things have operated before. So it starts with yourself as individuals, and then it starts with the cultural side to where you need to have some leaders who are really supportive of this effort. So where are we? Now, we're really early in this journey. We mapped out some key high-level initiatives that tied into our 5 pillars from a strategic planning perspective. This just gives you a nice visual so that you can share this with the board decks, with the board members as far as your strategy, your initiative. That was how I have been able to achieve some of my success recently in such a short time by highlighting where we're going to be moving towards. But then most importantly, you need to put together where are you going to invest in? What is your strategic investments going to be that's aligned with the organization? So we built out some prioritization, but very simply, there's 2 big things that I'm going to be focusing on, and I'm sure they are on your list as well. So as with any organization, we want to be a data-driven organization. We want to use data to make decisions versus using experience and past intuition. We want to have real-time data, act on it, and make a decision based upon that. So building out data, enterprise data strategy, and a data platform is top of our radar and top initiative for me. And the second one that's big is we need to modernize our contact center. So our contact center is the face for the organization. It is where the patient calls to make a schedule, the patient calls to ask any questions. It is our first line of contact with the consumer. So we're moving towards an enterprise CRM solution that's going to give us a 360 view of the patient. So what is a 360 view? Well, definitely we'll have a single view of the patient based upon their demographic information, their medical histories. But we also want to pull in external data, external third-party data, whether it's social, whether it's items coming from the claim side or items coming from regulatory agencies like the CMS. We want to put in all that information so that we could capture and understand this person. For us, our clients, we serve kids primarily, but the family members are also the customers in our world as well. So the parents of the kids themselves, any family members, we want to put in all that data so we can get as much information as we can about this one contact or about that initial contact when they call our contact center. Prime example is, I'm pretty sure almost everyone on this webinar are Amazon users somehow. Amazon knows so much about me right now. They could tell me, hey, David, in 2 days, you're going to run out of detergent. So better order now, or you can set up triggers to pre-order ahead of time when they know you're going to run low. Those are the types of experiences that we want to create in healthcare. We are playing catch-up as we speak, but that is what the consumers want in terms of that experience. We want a retail-like experience, and which goes back to the consumerism discussion that John was talking about. But to close it off, we don't have the magical answer, that one easy button to push, but start with the cultural transformation. You need to drive that down throughout the organization to drive a true digital transformation. Because if you don't, this is what's going to happen. The average lifespan of companies on the S&P 500, it is shrinking. Now I started with the fact that 55% of the Fortune 500 companies are no longer in existence, while the lifespan on the S&P 500 is also shrinking. So think about your organization. Well, what is that? How are you going to survive and stay relevant? It's a journey. So in essence, stay with the journey, transform yourself, transform the organization with new innovative ideas, and most importantly, think about how you could utilize technology to be a competitive advantage. Your sole task as a C-suite members or IT leaders should not be focusing on keeping the lights on. Focus on strategy, focus on how do you transform the organization to be more digitally focused. So with that being said, we know we want to make this a lot more interactive. I'm going to turn this over to John, and then we'll be more than happy to answer questions as they come in.
Thanks, David. Appreciate your thoughts and input, and I think you're spot on a number of the challenges and issues that you raised that we face as an industry. And obviously, with the rapidly growing number of digital health technology solutions that are hitting the marketplace, I think it's really wise for organizations to start to think about how do I and when do I incorporate those technologies and those applications into our provider organizations, and what's the impact of that. And as we thought through your comments, we thought it was important to kind of to lay out some use cases, and the next few slides really start to address that. And this is an example of a use case that we've got a number of clients looking at. You've got to understand, I don't have the time to go into a lot of detail here because there's so many variables that drove this business model, but it's really important to understand the capability that I think digital health technologies afford us as an industry going forward. But what you see in front of you is a model that completely transforms the way healthcare is delivered today. And there are some organizations starting to look at this model. Obviously, that's a challenge for the industry because of the way reimbursement works today. But if you look at large organizations that have undertaken a significant amount of risk through ACO, through health plans, whatever it might be, they're starting to focus on, how do I do a better job using this new technology of keeping the patient healthy and well, as opposed to treating them when they become ill. And this model kind of is illustrative of how that happens, but basically says we aggregate a tremendous amount of information in the future about the healthcare, both electronic medical record information, genomic information, and what's going on in the daily world with this individual. If you really look at an EMR, and EMRs are very important, don't misunderstand me, but it's all retroactive. It's what's happened in the past to the patient. I think we're really going to impact how care is delivered in the future and focus on wellness and prediction and prevention. We've got to capture the real-time data that's being generated by the individual. As David pointed out, going to Burger King is not a healthy thing. You may not change, well, first of all, I will tell you, you will not change 100% of an individual's lifestyle or diet consumption or consumption of foods. However, sending a reminder certainly starts to push accountability toward them for certain healthy actions. So in this model that you see in front of you, it basically starts with the individual. And what digital health technology will allow you to do is really treat or coach or manage that individual's health care in a location other than a medical facility, a home, anywhere else, a gym. And we view the primary coach or individual that's interacting with that patient. And by the way, I don't even like the term patient. I really prefer to use the term individual or consumer, because that's kind of what they're becoming in this model, is we have an advisor that has access to a tremendous amount of data, all the data that we've talked about that can be generated from all these various sources, and interact with the individual on a real-time basis through a telehealth presence or whatever it might be, to say, hey, John, we know from your genomic information, your profile, that you're predisposed toward diabetes because of your family history. We also see, because we're capturing information from digital health devices, that your weight's going up, your blood pressure's going up, and your sugar's going up. That's illustrative of something potentially going wrong. Why don't we engage right now as opposed to waiting before you come ill? So it really enables us to predict and prevent before illness ever occurs, hopefully. Certainly not in all cases. We're still going to have some of those cases. So the individual, and how this really works in the model for this particular organization is kind of their roadmap for the future, is we aggregate tremendous amount of data, as I mentioned earlier, EHR, social networking, social media, which I think is very valid, genomic profiles, as well as real-time data coming from all types of digital health technology sources. And we utilize something called cognitive computing, because there's no individual that has the capability to analyze the abundance of information that will be derived from capturing from all these sources. So we use a device, cognitive computing. It can be a Watson or Javion or something like that, that allows you to build algorithms, say, you know what, this is what's important, this is what we need to manage around our disease segments. And when alerts are hit, the coach is notified, and then there's interactive with the individual. However, we know that when you do have that interaction, the individual will need to be triaged somewhere in some cases. So the model says, based on what the individual is presenting with, the conversations you would have had with them, this is the best source of treatment for that individual today. So they're triaged to the right location, and ultimately, if severe enough, they wind up in the hospital. So that's kind of a roadmap that a number of our clients are starting to implement. There's a number of variations of these roadmaps that we work with clients, depending on where you are and how fast you want to progress, and kind of what your revenue stream looks like, because obviously, as I pointed out earlier, there's not a lot of incentive to do these kinds of things with 2 and 3% margins, unless you have an at-risk contract where you're heavily incented. If you start to look at the technologies, and I think David did a really good job of starting to articulate what those were, but I think these are the key ones that we as industry pundits really need to keep an eye on. Virtual health technology, or really the telehealth model that he alluded to. Cognitive computing tools. I think cognitive computing tools have the greatest opportunity to allow us to transform how healthcare is delivered than any other devices or tools that I've seen to date. When given as we know things are going to change with technology, so that's what I look at today. Obviously, the ability to collect and aggregate all this information from disparate sources requires some significant work from an interoperability standpoint. Healthcare analytics plays a key role, genomics information plays a key role, and IoT. We've already talked about personal health devices, biomedical devices, and I think David did a great job of talking about the security, because the more endpoints you have, the higher your security risk. And what we've done over the last 2 years is really start to look at solutions that enable this model to work and address some of these challenges that we've talked about. And obviously the biggest one that we don't often think about is what's the infrastructure requirements, given that we have such a massive amount of information that needs to flow bidirectionally, dynamically at any point in time. So those are real challenges you need to start to look at as you as you build out your roadmap and or strategy. And these are the areas where we're working very closely with a number of our larger clients. In closing my part of it, we're often asked is, well, you know, there's a lot to do. How do we get started? And what we suggest is really starting to look at an individual with responsibility for looking at how healthcare can change. I like to use the term Chief Innovation Officer. It could be a CIO that's unencumbered with daily operational requirements, but it's really somebody that can take off the blindfold and look at other industries and emulate what makes sense or what, and not emulate what doesn't make sense, but really someone responsible for creating the roadmap to successful transformation utilizing the existing or current or future technologies. The second thing we strongly suggest is really creating an innovation council. Innovation is not going to just, in and of itself, the technology part is not going to transform healthcare. We really need to start to look at how we focus and change and transform the way healthcare is delivered, enabled by some of the digital health technologies that David presented earlier. And there's significant opportunity there. And when organizations in other countries that have aggressively pursued some of these strategies have had significant results, albeit none as significant as I think is potentially available. What that helps drive and then is creation of an organizational strategy or plan around transformation utilizing this technology, and ensures that all the processes that are in place today are looked at and it's understood how digital technology can enhance or completely disrupt them. I'm a firm believer in disruptive approaches. I mean, if you look at how the industry's morphed, and not healthcare, but other industries, look what Amazon did to shopping. Look what Uber did to transportation. We're going to find in Uber and Amazon, there are thought-leading organizations that are starting to think like that today. And one point I want to really illustrate that I think David made, and I don't think it can be underemphasized, and the decision to move an organization forward utilizing this technology to maximum benefit really requires an innovative thought leader, entrepreneur as a CEO. This starts at the top because it changes the way healthcare is delivered within every segment of the delivery model that exists today. Once we create the organization plan and we have new models in place, we actually have to define, here's the way we care for individuals in this new model. Our care plans that exist today work well when an individual's in the hospital, or may work well from a continuum of care perspective, but really doesn't look at beside the traditional walls of healthcare. And when I say walls, I mean facilities in general. Then understand and develop an application technology roadmap. As I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, 260,000 new personal health applications are now being sold. That number doubled just last year, so I expect to see that kind of exponential growth continue. So your infrastructure and your technology and your application portfolios have to start to look at the whole consumerism side of the application requirements when you build out your portfolios. One of the last things I strongly suggest is engage with partners, engage with organizations that have done this before, and engage with thought leaders that know how to move the dial in an appropriate fashion, in an appropriate timeline. And lastly, and I cannot underemphasize this approach, and I've had a number of clients use it, and they've come back and said, you know what, we got better ideas than we ever thought we would, but get your individuals or your patients involved in this process. Consumers understand what they want. They may not be able to articulate it specifically, but they understand how they would like to interact and engage with thought-leading healthcare organizations. In terms of follow-up activities, I don't think we have any time for questions, but I would encourage you to, one, we will make all this information available on our website, so please take time to look at that and, you know, copy it as you need. We will be posting responses to all the questions as well as the responses on our blog, so feel free to look at that, and I think we'll probably send out a separate mailing to the participants on this webinar. If you have any questions individually, either David or myself, that you want to say, hey, my specific organization is a little bit different, you may not want to share with the entire audience, feel free to reach out to David or myself or Chris Perry, who will make sure that David and I respond. He's really good about that. And lastly, you know what, it's really important that we get your feedback. This was 45 minutes. I know David and I could have both spent 4 hours, because I've done it on these models in the past, talking through different scenarios, different approaches, different solutions. We really just not even hit the tip of the iceberg. So we would like your thoughts and feedback on, the depths of information you would like to have going forward. So with that, I will turn it back over to James, and look forward to answering each and every question that you provide. Thank you.
All right, everybody. I just want to thank David for joining us today, and John, thank you for your insight as well. And like we said, take a look at our website here, thehcigroup.com. And if you haven't already, we'd love for you to subscribe to our blog, and that's blog.thehcigroup.com. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. Please reach out to John or Chris, and their contact information is on the screen right now. And be looking forward to the recording of this webinar that will be coming out following this. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to the next opportunity to share with you. Take care.